Hey there, Mr. Young here. Welcome to class today. We're in lesson 2. How about that video? On primary and secondary sources. That's something we're going to hit a lot in today, and it's important to know the difference. It's not really that complex, but there can be confusion on to whether a source is the primary or secondary source. But we'll talk about it a little more. Let's get into what is evidence. So historians ask questions about how or why something happened. Why did World War I start? What was the favorite food of royalty during, the Ming Dynasty of China? How scary were Indian war elephants? These historians, when they ask these questions, they must find evidence, like a detective, which is something that shows proof or an indication that, well, something is true. Written documents or other materials can be seen as types of evidence. We've already talked about 2 types of these sources. Let's go over that one more time. We've got primary source, which is a first-hand piece of evidence, like a book written from that time period. And then a secondary source is a source not made in the time of the event. These sources are often written using information from a primary source. Examples would be encyclopedias or your textbook. I went to reach for it. It's out of reach. All right. Some other things to consider when using historical sources. Is the source reliable? Does this seem like a good source? One must consider why or where the book was written. For example, a diary written by a medieval court jester that hated the king might not exactly be a good source for information on, say, the governance of Old Britain. This leads us to point of view. In the jester example, one must consider that the point of view was from the jester and not, say, the prime minister, which probably would have been a good point of view. The jester might have what's called bias or unreasoned emotional judgment that could warp the historical accuracy, well, of that source. So you want to make sure that you've got the right person writing the source that you're using. All right, writing about history. Historians write about events, drawing conclusions, and making inferences from the information they have. Inferences are basically logical guesses. One might infer that I have bad eyesight because I wear glasses. That's an easy inference, but making inferences on events that happened a long time ago is a little tougher. There's bias, point of view, and reliability. All must be considered when a historian tries to make inferences of the past. You have to read many sources, making sure the facts are consistent. For example, I'm doing a research project on the mystical unicorn. I've read 4 books on unicorns. The first one says that unicorns love eating children. I say to myself, whoa, I had no idea, and I checked the other 3 books, and there's nothing of the sort in there. It turns out that the author of the first book I read just so happens to have had his child maimed in a horrific unicorn accident. His bias has tainted the facts now, and his book is now a questionable source for my unicorn research project. It's a good thing I confirmed the information and dug a little deeper. Such is the job of a good historian, to make sure that what you're reading is accurate. Now, your textbook at this point would go on to explain that if my research paper were going to be published on the mystical unicorn, it would be checked over and reviewed by other historians to make sure I wasn't publishing a bunch of malarkey. So historians, when they write stuff, other historians look at it and sort of review it. And then if they find it to be inaccurate, that historian author will be considered a hack. And nobody wants to be a hack. Alright, let's talk about conclusions real quick. A conclusion is a final decision reached by reasoning. It's kind of like an inference that is your final answer. Through my research of unicorns, I have concluded they are gentle and majestic creatures. That's my final answer, and I'm sticking to it. One last thing to hit before we conclude our lesson is the concept of interpretations. Facts can be viewed, they have to be viewed through people, and people have different ways of seeing things. That means that even though people have the same facts, they can be seen differently. My twin brother, for example, used the exact same information that I had to write his own paper on unicorns and determined that unicorns are not gentle and majestic, but lazy and smelly. They only appear gentle because they are so lazy and do not move. We had the same exact facts, but had some pretty different conclusions because we interpreted those facts differently. Alright, that's a lot on unicorns. Quiz time. Alright, real simple. Real simple quiz. You're never going to believe what it's on. Unicorns. No, primary and secondary sources. I want you to tell me what is a primary and secondary source. Please provide an example of each. This question is worth 5 points. So make sure you tell me this is what a primary source is. Here's an example. This is what a secondary source is. Here's an example. Check that spelling and grammar for me. All right. I want to see capitalization and punctuation, please. All right. That's it for today. Tomorrow we're moving on and more about what we're going to do in history class. All right. Have a good one. Let me know if you need anything.